Welcome back. We're discussing the controversial rise in the role of private military companies in the U.S. war effort in Iraq and Afghanistan as the Obama administration gears up for a major surge in the Afghan war. I'm joined by journalist and best-selling author Jeremy Scahill in New York, and here in Washington, D.C., Dr. Dov Zakheim, the chief financial officer for the Pentagon during the first term of the former U.S. President George W. Bush. Now, Dr. Zakheim, one of the things you did actually while in that role was to look at and I mentioned at the beginning, the huge amount of money, trillions of dollars that seem to be unaccounted for. What was the final verdict in that? What was
They
where
actually
did it go?
were accounted for. Here's the problem. They were called problem disbursements, which was if you got a zip code wrong on a check that had been written out, the record had the wrong zip code, it showed up as a problem disbursement. And this had gone on for years. When I first was confirmed, I remember Senator Byrd saying to me, you've got over about $2.5 trillion that are just not properly recorded. So what we did was we began a system, a rigorous system of going back to all those disbursements, all those payments, and making sure that they were all correctly recorded. By the time I left, we had accounted for about 2/3, so that's 2/3 of about $2.5 billion is already 1.6, 1.7 billion. Within a couple of years of that, we were down to 90%. I think the number's even lower now. It was simply a recording error. The trouble was the number was so vast, and people went, oh my God, the Defense Department has thrown out trillions of dollars. Wasn't true.
Well, we had an email or actually a question just now that came in from our chat room, live station chat room, Vicky in Greece, who wrote in saying, how does the much larger pay rate for contractors affect the U.S. soldiers who are paid much less?
Well, there's clearly a concern there. The soldiers, it's a much more complex payment because remember, the soldiers are going to get retirement pay. The soldiers know they're in there for 20 years if they choose to be. So it's a very different thing. A contractor may be paid a lot now, but may not have a job next year or in 6 months' time. So the soldiers aren't as uptight about this.
It doesn't look so good, though, when you look at the kind of amounts being spent and what seem to be huge sums given out to contractors. It certainly doesn't help the image of the contractors looking at the kind of budgets they have.
Well, again, that's absolutely right. That's why there's been a major focus on, for instance, subcontracting to Iraqi subcontractors or Afghan subcontractors. The idea is to get the money out there. A lot of these subcontractors are quite small. They aren't in a position to just directly contract with the U.S. government. There are all kinds of complications there. So you have the prime contractors doing that. But the effort is to get the money out to the people in the field.
Well, let's get a question in from one of our viewers who's been standing by from London. Khan's on the line. Go ahead, please.
Yes, my question is that, when Obama came to fighting the election, coming to power, he made a lot of promises, and all those promises were actually lies because he said he wanted to change, and there was no change. Like politicians, you see, they always do these kind of lies. And also, what he did, you see, is following the same principles and same policy.
Khan, let me ask Jeremy to answer that question. Also, one that came in from Muhammad in Kenya, who wrote in saying, "What is the difference between the mercenaries hired by rogue leaders to fight for them, or the contractors sent to Afghanistan by the Obama administration?" Obviously, a lot of people are skeptical about this. Could you see any change taking place? Could you see any change in the way contractors operate that might make them more feasible? And are you surprised that the Obama administration has not really changed anything?
Well, first of all, I think it's a bit disingenuous to say that that President Obama lied on the campaign trail regarding Afghanistan. I think, in fact, that President Obama was abundantly clear that he intended to escalate that war. And in fact, he credited himself on the campaign trail with taking the initiative to call for more troops in Afghanistan. And he criticized Senator McCain and, in fact, President Bush for their Afghan policy. So I think that's a bit of a disingenuous swipe at the president. I think he's been very consistent. Now, I have a big problem with that policy, but I do think that the president was very clear that he was going to do that. When it comes, though, to the broader issue of these contractors, I don't think that President Obama could implement his Afghanistan policy or his Iraq policy without them. These companies have become like the American Express card of U.S. military operations. They simply don't leave home without them. The alternative would be to not fight these wars, or would be to have a draft in the United States, which ultimately, I believe, would make these wars politically untenable because because people aren't exactly busting down the doors to sign up for the military right now. One thing, though, that Mr. Zakheim said about the payment here, you have contractors that are making as much as General McChrystal, who is the commander of the war. And the fact is that many of the U.S. contractors are veterans who do receive those benefits in addition to the benefits and pay that they receive from their company on U.S. government contracts. So essentially, U.S. taxpayers are being double billed for some of these contractors. We paid for their training, we pay for their military benefits, and now we pay their six-figure salary to be in a war.
That's true, actually, Dr. Zakheim. We've even looked at it on the issue of contractors here. That people are hired. There's supposed to be a cooling-off period after the military leave, but those cooling-off periods are often bypassed through all kinds of mechanisms.
Well, I think the reason that they hire people with military experience is simply because these are the best people who can do the job of, say, providing security. It's true that some of them make a lot of money, but again, it's very short term. It is not something that they're going to make over a number of years.
It still doesn't look good to the taxpayer who's having to double bill as
well. But the trouble is, if the taxpayer is not going to have the private security guard, that means you'll have to increase the number of military people. And once you do that, then you're paying them for 20 years, not for one. And it's not so much the draft that's the issue, because we cut down during the Clinton years the military by a third. These were all volunteers. And yes, by the way, the Army is meeting its recruiting goals. The Marines especially are meeting their recruiting goals. One of the reasons is the economy is just not very good, so people are joining the military, knowing full well they might be deployed to Afghanistan or Iraq.
Jeremy, do you see any situation, because I mean, contractors have been used since the American Revolution days, they've been going back even in the Vietnam War. Do you see any situation where the issue of the use of contractors might change to make them more feasible in your eyes, more accountable, something that allows the system to work properly and perhaps do the job it's supposed to?
Well, I think, and I know that Mr. Zakheim is aware of this, that one of the debates right now in the Congress in the United States is over the issue of what is an inherently governmental function. I mean, should we even as a nation permit private forces to be deployed abroad that have an authorization to use lethal force? President Obama, when he was a senator, was the primary author of the Democratic Party's leading legislation in the Congress to try to bring some sense of oversight or regulation to this industry. However, if you look at the statistics right now, there are over 360 vacancies for contract oversight positions right now, meaning that there's a horrible lack of oversight, and I don't see how you could oversee 120,000 individuals in a war zone, particularly those that are being sent to places where the U.S. military doesn't go in some cases.
Okay, well, listen, gentlemen, I have to stop there because we're out of time, but thank you both, Jeremy and Dr. Zakheim, for joining us for this debate.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Remember, you can follow the show on Facebook and see what we're up to there. You can give us your feedback on the topics and post your questions and comments. On the next show, is the American dream still alive and well? We look at the personal stories of immigrants who come to the U.S. What do they find and how are they shaping the country? Be sure to tune in for that. From me and the team, we'll see you next time.